G'day patrons, I want to thank you again for your willingness to support the videos that I'm making. I'm going to do this a little differently. I'm going to try to just make an extended video. The topic for this video is the ENFP, and I've made a whole heap of notes, and instead of like a polished video, I wanted to just sort of press record and allow me sort of space to delve into the type, allowing me to sort of go where I need to go to unpack and explain how I see the ENFP. And I think what that'll do, it'll help me to relax more into the video and not be so aware that there's a camera in front of me, and be able to, I think that'll sort of allow more depth to come through the video. So I appreciate your feedback on this style of video. If it's, you like it, you don't like it, that sort of thing, and I'll just keep recording and just keep going with it. And just allow the video to be whatever it's going to become. So I've got a whole heap of notes here. I'm just going to be referring to the notes and then going into each point and seeing where it leads, and then going to the next point. So you'll see me reading my notes a little bit, but they're just to prompt me to go into the next point. So the ENFP. How I'll do this is I'll go into the functional stack and also look at what self-actualization looks like for the type, look at relationships, the ENFP and relationships, and also just how they sort of, they're often called the champion. So I'll just sort of go into sort of how they impact a person in an interaction. Using especially their NE and their FI. So the first thing that sort of struck me looking at the ENFP is their extroverted intuition is, this sort of broad, sort of scattergun of ideas and exploration. It's just like lightning, almost just sort of going out there. And I sort of picture the lightning. It's like, you've got the main shaft of lightning, and then you've got all of these little parts of the lightning that come out on the side, really sort of fine points of light. And I see, in a sense, that's sort of some ways of explaining the NE. It's like its ability to kind of branch out of the mainstream narrative, if you like, and notice the subtleties and notice subtle connections between other sort of branches of lightning, branches of thought, if you like. So they're always searching for meaningful connections, and they're really optimistic-looking people. Like they're always up. Most of the time, their default is quite a positive, outgoing presence, quite excitable, and exploration of ideas and life experiences. That is just where that NE just sort of soaks in all that information. And an endless search for connection and meaning, just constantly, especially in the early years, just soaking in as much life experience and other people's life experience as possible. And it sees indirect connections between everything. And if you can hear little sounds at times, it's my little pooch over here. So they're always on, always looking and waiting for new information and ideas. And I have a wondering whether, because of that really optimistic part of the ENFP, and that they're wanting to have a positive impression on people and see people actualize themselves and so on, if when things don't work out for other people that they're close to, the sense is that they could feel that quite deeply. That sort of maybe setbacks and self-actualization for others could be felt quite sharply on the inside. So there's a sense that they get out into the world and experience as much as they can. Not like SE, that is more sort of hands-on experience. It seems to be more not as hands-on in the sense of it's more getting out there in amongst the lives of people and around people's experience, and the greater context that experience is happening, rather than like being cliche. It's not about going and skydiving or doing extreme sensory things. It's not that sort of experience. It's more getting into the lives of people, finding out about how people live their lives. It seems to be more people focused. So they get as much experience in their NI as they possibly can, and then all that information sort of gets pulled down into them, where they develop their value structure through their introverted feeling. So they need that full experience, and that full experience then interacts with introverted feeling, and they get to know what it is that they like, they don't like, the sort of things that they discover, the sorts of things that give them passion, that give them drive, and they build that value structure through the extroverted intuitive experience. It's interesting though, and I'll probably go into this a little more later, that their impact on others is kind of an indirect, direct way. It's like they motivate through influence, and sort of filling people with energy in a sense, or being able to speak into people in a way that generates energy and focus in others for them to then move forward. But it's not this sort of, it's not dictatorial or authoritarian in their form of motivation. It's much more of an indirect kind of atmosphere that they create. So they've got this NE map that sort of maps the outer world of experience, and then this the inner map, the inner FI map that has its values. And in a sense, when they're interacting with another person, that NE and that FI can really get a great sense of the other person and where they're at, and like sort of get a real present sense of who they are, but also a sense of who they really are moving forward. Like they can get a real sense of the future you, and then be able to provide information again indirectly that could motivate that person to move forward into who they into more of who they really are, if they take it on board. So this NE, it's kind of like a nuclear bomb of energy. It's just always on. It's like tireless in its ability to think outside the box and make all of these seemingly direct connections between everything. And I had a real sense, and it's kind of a given in one sense, but it's also worth noting that put that NE in another person, they just couldn't handle it. They would crumble pretty quickly under the weight of its activity. But it fits perfectly within the ENFP. So ways I've sort of looked at describing NE, it's like free flight. It's just kind of out there. That perceiving function, it's sort of just, like a free radical. It's just going wherever it needs to go. It's very action orientated in the sense of it's that extroverted function. Essentially, it's out. It's working itself out into the world. And the ENFP is like a crusader. That NE is like a crusader. Being driven by their value system. It's out there trying to actualize and impact the world. But the crusader doesn't have swords and guns and all of that. These weapons are more weapons of influence, of giving people a sense of who they are, empowering people, reconciling people. For the ENFP that has that mediator gifting, they can influence relationships quite strongly. And then this introverted feeling is very grounded. It's like a tree. You've got the tree top. The tree top and all of its branches is NE, and then the root system underneath is very much FI. It's very, very grounding, and of course because it's introverted, people don't see it. But I think people can see it if they look hard enough. So FI is a bit more reflective. That sort of introverting. Sits with things more to form judgments and values. And in contrast to the crusader, the FI is like the flesh and blood of the ENFP. So the crusaders out there with their armor and weapons to impact positively in people's lives, and then underneath that NE armor, even though the armor is not defensive, the armor is kind of like the ENFP is set up to be of influence to people, so it's kind of that kind of armor. I guess just trying to paint the picture of a crusader, but underneath is this FI flesh and blood, the mortality of the ENFP, which very few people see. Which I'll go into soon. So the reality is they're trying to make the world a better place by helping people in the world and making the world a better place. And in a sense, they just do that by being there. They can be very intentional, but they don't need to be intentional in a sense. Their presence can be empowering to people. But they do want to grab onto the possibilities that they see in people and help others to autonomously run with their insights. They won't do it for the person, but they'll certainly sort of provide options to consider about how a person could move forward. And it's kind of like NE when they're engaging with another person, and it's like NE is just throwing out little gifts all the time, like little things that if people are sensitive enough, they could grab onto what they're saying and take those as little gifts, whether it's encouragement or information that might be of benefit to the listener, that could empower their inner and outer world if they are attuned to what the ENFP is saying. So NE and FI sort of enables a holistic embrace of people. So people can feel known inside and out when they're in the presence of an ENFP. So I kind of see NE as like this information that's laced with FI depth. It's like on the outside, ENFPs can look very bubbly and very excitable and inaccurately be perceived as surface level kinds of people, but really, and I think they definitely like to have fun and be carefree, but deeper down there's this sort of FI depth that can be laced through their narrative, that I think it's almost like a pill with a coating, with a smooth coating on the outside, is easily digestible and easily swallowed. And so I just see that in a lot of in the way that ENFPs can communicate. There's a sense that NEs sort of NE kind of pulls the ENFP away from their core self, if you like. It's kind of out there all the time. And then you got this FI that wants to sort of pulling into the person, trying to form values and ideas, and there's just a sense that could be almost like a tension there if it's not in balance. And it's like the FI needs time to catch up to what the NE is gathering, and some downtime, sort of times of relaxation and even meditation could be times for the ENFP to find their center again, to find balance in the system, in their system. So and again, it's like NE and FI acts to pull people in with their introverted feeling and launch people out with their extroverted intuition. But again, with the misunderstanding of who ENFPs really are, people could miss what's really going on in the interaction with an ENFP because they're too busy getting caught up in the energy of the NE and not seeing the deeper purpose of the ENFP. So they can judge the ENFP as not not very smart or very flighty, and with that judgment sort of blocks them off from seeing the actual depth that's coming from the ENFP. And that could be felt behind the scenes. I think an ENFP could feel that judgment or that feeling missed or misunderstood or unappreciated. But that'll be certainly happening in the background because the NE can sort of act like a bit of a camouflage to what's going on underneath. So I was thinking about ENFPs and their desire to kind of experience everything that people experience, to gain all of this sort of knowledge of people so that they can be of benefit to people. I was thinking, I wonder if that causes ENFPs to run into problematic situations and actually have negative experiences in order to have the experience, or whether they gain those sorts of experiences. I'm sure that does happen, but I wonder if ENFPs also sort of vicariously experience the negative experiences through the experience of other people, through their interaction with people. They hear something that a life experience that somebody had that turned into a negative, and by getting inside the person's experience, especially with that FI, but also NE, that they essentially have the negative experience vicariously through the other's experience, and then they can take that information forward into their lives. Maybe they have an ability to do that. Maybe more so than other types. I'm not sure. So I kind of, sometimes I see ENFPs, they almost look like FE DOMs, because they're so optimistic, so positive, quite bubbly, quite smiley people. And so it's like NE mixed with FI looks like FE in a sense, like at first glance. Of course it's not that, but it can look like that to people. And that's where I think maybe the judgment of the ENFP comes from, is people see it as, not consciously as like this is FE, but they just see kind of this happy-go-lucky person and miss the intelligence. So it's just interesting that those two functions kind of can camouflage them to look like FE when they're really not. I think after our first glance look, it's quite clear that a lot of ENFPs, they have this kind of NE glow aura about them. There's this sort of, just this positive kind of happiness, excitement that they kind of oozes out of them, but their eyes can seem quite still. You know, that it's like they've got FI eyes with an NE exterior. It's the FI eyes that sort of have a stillness, and it's almost like you can see through them down into the deep depth of their character. Which leads me to talking about introverted feeling. Because I think they are as deep as they are excitable in the outer world. I think they have a rich depth that is often missed, unfortunately, by people. And I think, as I said before, NE and FI hides their intelligence. For people that know ENFPs, that this is possibly news to them, or people listening to this that then will meet an ENFP, being curious about the FI depth will, I think, leave a lasting impression on the ENFP. It's like embracing both the NE and the FI in the ENFP will influence them as much as they are able to influence you, and will have a deep impact on them. And so adopting a curiosity to get to know the ENFP on a deeper level. And I just wonder, because of that FI function, and I've seen it with some ENFPs, you know, there is a vulnerability to hurt feelings behind that active NE. That there is a soft-hearted, very much a soft-heartedness to the ENFP that could be missed because of the NE function, which is probably both a blessing and a curse to the ENFP, because they protect their heart in a sense with their NE, but it also means that they can be missed and misunderstood because of NE. So just to recap, we've got this NE that's just out there, active all the time, creating all of these connections and meanings and possibilities. Got this FI core that develops its judgments and its value system and creates that sort of rich inner world. And then we've got the extroverted thinking tertiary function, which I sort of call the secret weapon of an ENFP. So TE can have a directness when needed, and I think you can see that in an ENFP because every once in a while, if a value is threatened or there's something that's happening that they think is really important and they don't want to be misunderstood about it, their TE can come up and be more direct and state something more directly where needed to address a situation. Especially if values have been violated or they're feeling misunderstood in some way. I think that can be uncomfortable for an ENFP to do that. I think they don't really want to do that. They will obviously want to be more in their influential, indirect NE influencing. So I think the TE moment may not be experienced as very, because they're NFs. We'll kind of feel the harshness of their TE at the same time. as the others receiving the TE boundary. But it's really important that that function be allowed to happen, because I think it acts like a shield. It acts like, so you've kind of got this NE out there, FI in here, and then there's like a TE can be like a shield protecting the system, if you like, when they need to put a boundary in place, when they need to say no, be more direct about it. They can sort of act as a protective layer around the ENFP to prevent burnout and so on. And also can help to bring balance to NE and FI when they're using that TE function to protect themselves from overextending themselves by saying no, by being direct with people, putting boundaries in place with people, and sort of avoid any SI grip reactions or exhaustion. So TE can assert values and put boundaries in place where necessary. And a TE assertion from an ENFP could be experienced quite, like, be a bit of a shock to the other person or the group hearing it, because it seems a little uncharacteristic of an ENFP. At least for some ENFPs. Some ENFPs could use their TE a lot more than others, but for those that, you know, sort of functioning effectively in their NE and FI, and then all of a sudden, you know, at some point there's a TE boundary or directness that comes out, it could be experienced quite strongly from other people. So it can act like a shield. It could protect them from burnout. So people could mistake the ENFP bubbliness for naivety and try to take advantage, and TE boundaries can protect them, can protect the ENFP from this. So introverted sensing. So one of the challenges the ENFP has is that they're not always or very rarely connected to their body, and due to that, when the body's not acknowledged and they're extending themselves out into the world constantly, real or imagined illnesses or symptoms can present themselves in the body to try to bring them back to their body, to try to get their attention. So sometimes the symptoms could be real, like there could be actual health issues associated with overextending themselves. Perhaps more often, especially in the earlier years of an ENFP, they're probably more somatic symptoms, in the sense that there's nothing actually wrong with them physically. It's their body protesting to them not being in it. And you know, I have read that ENFPs are susceptible to hypochondria because they're not in their body that much. They've kind of got a mysterious connection, sort of connection with the body. So there could be a tension between novel NE and traditional SI. You know, that sort of, you know, they're you know, they're polar opposites in that sense. And I think if an ENFP has a traditional upbringing, this could cause tension between for the ENFP who's wanting to experience life, you know, get out there and let their NE kind of have its fill. That traditional life could, upbringing I should say, could, because in a sense they're having a traditional upbringing will instill some values in the ENFP, and if it's overly restrictive, the upbringing, then when they get a bit older, that NE might want to just explode out into experiencing things. They start to see people having life experiences and seeing all different types of people they want to interact with, and then they could have a conflict with their current value system that they're brought up with, and that could be something quite challenging for an ENFP. It could also be beneficial in that the values could actually protect them from harm, but at the same time it might restrict their NE from being able to explore life and develop that dominant function. So I think NE can sometimes cloak potential or upcoming burnout. You know, it's like a great camouflage system, and in that sense, I think like dominant SI users. Thanks, Sammy. Dominant SI users, I've noticed that they're on and then they're off. All of a sudden, their body just kind of goes tired, and it's not like a gradual tiredness. It's like they kind of dive quite quickly, and they recognise it instantly, and they respond to that, and go to sleep, have a rest or whatever. But I think ENFPs, because that SI function is inferior, they can keep going and ignoring those introverted sensing promptings, just not hear them and keep going, and then they're really in danger of having a in the grip SI reaction. So in the grip. So ENFPs are altruistic in their present, so they're self-sacrificing. They're wanting to benefit those around them. They want to serve others. So it's sort of ironic that because I think ENFPs, they self-actualize when they're actually helping others to self-actualize. But in the pursuit of self-actualization, by actualizing others, they're vulnerable to burnout, which kind of sabotages or undermines the actualization process. But I think I'll speak a bit later about how I don't think that's really an issue long term, but it's just an interesting way of looking at it. So this self-sacrifice present reality that the ENFP lives in could cause a lack of self-care and eventual burnout. And they could, so they self-actualize by giving to others, and that goal of self-actualization could lead to vulnerability to burnout. So, the way in the grip situation could occur is that NE and its constant alertness, its constant activity, can lead to muscle tension. Like the body is just can't cope with that. The level of the level of activity that is being generated in NE, and muscle tension, if prolonged, can lead to exhaustion and a vulnerability to getting in the grip of the introverted sensing function. So you can imagine, like if you were to hold your fist like tight, before too long there'll be tension in the hand, and if you keep doing that, eventually it'll cramp up, and then it'll get very sore, and then you might not even be able to open it up. It's just essentially it's in the grip. It's stuck in the grip, and that may be a good way of looking at it. So burnout and exhaustion, in a general sense, can be a part of a lot of ENFP's development. It might be, just something that they NE up here, SI down here, and the exhaustion that can come in there is like, as they're going along in life, it kind of will be doing this, as it's sort of teaching and helping the ENFP to recognize their body, to as the body continues to sort of let them know that they're actually in a body. And so I see that it can actually just be a part of development and not a big deal in a general sense. But I think there could be extra vulnerability for an ENFP if for whatever reason their top other three functions are underdeveloped. One of the things that could cause the function to be underdeveloped in more than just a general average degree would be due to their childhood and family of origin, upbringing influences. So for someone with a low level chronic but long term in the grip reaction, it's like they're stuck. Let me say that again. There can be short-term SI in the grip reactions. You know, it could be a few hours or a day or a week. But then I think there can be this sort of ongoing SI in the grip reactional way of living in an ENFP that's more chronic, which it would be more connected, most likely connected with family of origin issues. So a stifled childhood could lead to undeveloped NE, causing overflightiness, even for them, sort of an overflightiness, and or it could maybe cause a low-level SI grip interior. So they're kind of, for extroverted intuitive, there's too much of them that's being introspected internally. They're focused on facts. They're locked in themselves more than much more than would be normal or natural. So internally is more SI stuckness than FI integration of the NE. I'm not sure what I meant by that. So a child with a very, very restrictive childhood, even one where there was forms of abuse, could find that they either grow up to have a really rebellious NE and just explode in getting into life in ways that could be detrimental to them, or they live more of a restricted kind of life in that they're sort of stuck in their body. And I think it's those sorts of people that would potentially be very hypersensitive to their body, almost living like an SI dominant person, but it's like they're having a constant bad day. So with someone that's having those sorts of experiences, it would be time to either create room for FI integration. So if their NE is just kind of flying off in all directions and they're just burning themselves out, they're just jumping from one thing to the next to the next to the next, it might be time to sort of slow that down and allow some of what they're experiencing to actually ground them in some of their value system. Let's let all of that information actually be absorbed into their value system, which will cause them to be uncomfortable and may need help with that, because to go inward is painful because of their childhood. So it might be time to have some FI integration, or if they're stuck in the introverted sensing, and they've got this kind of really tiny NE up here, and they're living down here in their SI, it might be time to get out there and let that NE have some breathing space. And when I talk about self-actualization, I'll talk about how that can be done. So underdeveloped FI may lead to flightiness, NE bouncing from one thing to the next. I've talked about that. Not allowing FI to make informed judgments. Underdeveloped NE, they may find themselves trusting other people's experience too much. They sort of become dependent on people, which is very unlike an ENFP. While they're a cooperative type, they like to be cooperative in their goal setting and achievements. They're also very much individuals. and like to see others as individuals as well. So that's that FI function. So if that NE's not developed, and essentially that means the FI is not developed because they don't have their own set of values, that they become dependent and trusting of others too much, which could lead them to being taken advantage of and end up kind of causing more harm than good. So the good news is that in the group reactions for the ENFP can lead to change and self-actualization. So if there's a person that's totally unaware of their body, an ENFP is unaware of their body, and then they eventually collapse, that can be great time for some reflection and for some sort of deeper understanding of themselves, and could wake them up to this introverted sensing function and wake them up to taking some action for more self-care activities. So NE is pushing out into the world, FI is pulling them into their value system, Te is the sort of dominant. Sorry, let me recap that. So NE is pushing out, FI is pulling in, and TE, if it's dormant, can lead to burnout. If TE is not there to put some boundaries in place, giving NE and FI time to connect to each other and find some balance between the two, there could be possible burnout. However, burnout can be a wake-up call to the imbalance and lead to them becoming aware of any underlying issues that could be causing that imbalance and can lead to change. So there's a possible sort of FI-SI loop for the ENFP, and if they're stuck in detail, they're stuck in the past, stuck in detail, and kind of all of this energy going into the body, into themselves, and that's looping around with their into their possible sort of faulty belief system or faulty values that came out of childhood. Like, we can have a value that we're not valuable, you know, coming out of childhood. If we had problematic attachments with our caregivers, and then that feeds back into SI and then back into FI, and it can just sort of reinforcing a loop of negativity. So some of the stresses for an ENFP, obviously details, you know, overly supervised, little stimulation, rigid rules, if their values are violated or if they're overcommitted. So they're stresses for the ENFP. And ironically, the reaction, so if they are in those stresses for too long and get in the grip, then that in the grip reaction mirrors to some extent the stresses themselves, but it's like they surrender to the SI focus. So they surrender to this inner, their energy being introverted into themselves, and they get stuck there. Leads to physical exhaustion, focus on facts, can become impatient, overly sensitive to body symptoms, stuck in detail, and they can look like an SI Dom having a bad day. And that will lead to possible withdrawal, depression, obsessiveness, focus on body, and it's just stuck on the inside, very unpleasant for them. So, as an extrovert, with their energy going inward first, be very uncomfortable, draining, uninteresting, unpleasant, inaccurate, and just overall a yucky place for them to be. So possible remedies for ENFPs stuck in their introverted sensing, or if they're just simply exhausted. A remedy essentially is to stop and allow themselves to be in the grip. And what I mean by that is, like, be in the body for a bit. Be in the body, not stuck in the body, because when we're in the grip and we're stuck, we're in it. We're not observing it. We're actually in it, and it's a very different. They're two very different things. It's like someone who's depressed. When they're in they have no hope. They're being very much influenced and looking out into the world or into themselves through the lens of depression, and they can't. They're being informed by the depression since they can't get out of it. Whereas when a person observes depression, they realize that they're not all and completely depressed. They've got a part that's depressed. Then they can kind of observe it. So what's the depression doing? Well, it's saying there's no hope, and but it's coming from more of a sort of an observing. Where's my hand? Observing the depression, and talking about it, as opposed to sort of being in the depression and talking from it. And that's the same for this situation. So rather than being stuck in their body and looking at life through the symptoms of their body, or through the details of whatever details they're sort of stuck in, essentially stuck in their body, they start to observe them doing that. So they're like, yeah, I'm noticing my body, I'm feeling these symptoms, that my body's kind of doing this and it's doing that. I'm noticing that I'm obsessing about this work situation, and this spreadsheet that I'm dealing with, and I'm or other sorts of details. So they start to talk about what they're doing rather than just being in what they're doing, and that can help to bring relief from being in it. Other things are just resting and moving away from the detail. So it's like, okay, recognizing that I'm sort of obsessed with this certain bit of detail here. I'm going to just move away from it. Moving away from it can simply going and talking to someone about what's going on. Talk it out. Other things can be things like exercise, having just quiet time, some mindfulness, some meditation, just activities that help the body to be felt, to be looked after, and giving the body rest so that the ENFP can get it. It's like giving the body rest gives them ability to get out of their body, sort of get out of their body again, back into their NE. But the key from there is to learn to care for the body. So this process, these remedies of just allowing the body to recover, and the mindfulness, meditation, these sorts of things can lead to an awareness of the body in a healthy way, and over time allows awareness of the early warning signs and overload. So hence quiet time meditation is a great medicine for protection from burnout. This will also help to bring greater relationship between NE and FI and allow SI to influence the system. Because of inferior SI, they are not aware of the tension in the body until it shows signs of real symptoms or somatic symptoms to let them know that they are out of balance. Hence, exercise, mindfulness, rest helps an ENFP to feel the body and give it rest from all the NE experiences. So I want to look at introverted sensing development towards self-actualization. So I just had a thought that maybe an ENFP, a way of sort of developing the SI kind of directly, but really more indirectly, is something like reading history books or biographies of people related to the things that they value. So if there's a certain area of social justice that they're concerned about or that they're passionate about, reading the history of it, maybe even reading the history of the injustice of the world, and various people that have influenced in a positive or negative sense towards the certain social justice area that they're interested in, could help to inform or develop their introverted sensing. And also, getting around an ISTJ or an ISFJ to help an ENFP remember and reflect. So just being around someone whose dominant function is SI, not for long periods, but just that SI dominant approach to life will sort of rub off on them a little bit. So once NE and FI are developed, certain SI decisions will need to be made. So there's a sense that as the ENFP is getting older, their NE is developed to a large degree. They've got their values and they're set on their sort of life mission, and TE is there to kind of back them up. Then there's going to be sort of more traditional type decisions that need to be made. So they could be where the person lives, who they live with, do they get married, who do they get married to, where do they work, what organisation do they get involved in, how many children do they have, all of these sorts of things kind of can anchor the ENFP down in a healthy sense. And that so once those decisions are made, then there's a sense that their NE is more can be sort of targeted in a certain area of life. So beforehand, their NE was just sort of anywhere and everywhere, going off into all sorts of different groups and experiences and all of that to gain all this information. Some of these SI decisions will sort of help that NE to be targeted more directly, whether it's directed into family, directed into a certain business, into a certain cause, into a certain area that they live in. It's kind of enables them to actualize themselves in a specific location through some SI decisions. So FI and SI allows decisions to be made to settle down, allowing some SI foundation to exist to empower a greater mission to be accomplished. And so part of the actualization process for an ENFP is some of those traditional decisions to be made so that they can live out their mission more effectively. And some ENFPs maybe resistant to that, to this sort of thing. It might feel like a bit of a cop-out or a bit of a selling out. But it's not. But there's still going to be, and there's still going to be ENFPs. But it's just about where they're going to be ENFPs or who they're going to be themselves with, rather than being everywhere and everywhere trying to influence. It's more about helping them to localize where they're going to be influential. Some paradoxes and apparent contradictions for the ENFP when they're heading towards self-actualization is that their assistance to others' actualization, which actualizes them in a way, however their self-sacrifice can lead to burnout. I've mentioned that earlier, but it's part of the process. So anyway, I went through that earlier, so I won't go through that again. So there's also another sort of catch-22 for the ENFP, which is their NE's kind of out there trying to look for the self, and whereas, and in a sense, that's a rejection of the self that they actually already have, and so it can kind of be like a cat chasing its tail. It's chasing after, it's like it's chasing after what it already has. So the need to find authentic self, ironically, could lead them away from the self that is present, causing a sort of rejection of the self they are looking for, hindering self-confidence and self-esteem, and causing a sense of not being authentic. So because ENFPs, the more authentic they feel they are, the more confidence they feel they're building, and more self-esteem that is built into them through their authenticity. But there could be kind of a hindrance to that when, if they're looking for themselves, they're going to be feeling like until they find themselves, they're not authentic. So there's a sense that to minimize this paradox, if you like, is embracing the self that exists currently, and seeing that however the self is being experienced currently is authentic. It is who they are today, and that through that they can then continue to build on their authenticity. It's almost like the more authentic they are with their current self, the more honest they are with their current self, the more authentic they're being. When they're sort of out there trying to search for authenticity, it's like it's moving them away from their authentic self, if that makes any sense. Hi, Sammy. So, and so there's a sense that kind of requires the ENFP to become more balanced in the sense of looking after their body, looking after themselves. It could be, if they are seeking self out there, trying to find themselves here out there, it could be pointing towards an underdeveloped introverted feeling sort of value structure. And so slowing down the NE search and sitting with what they know and what they know of themselves could lead to a balance, and also a more sense of their own authenticity, which will lead to the confidence and self-esteem. So I want to make a point that self-actualization within, I think, in life, but also with the the MBTI functional stack. I think it's a natural process. I think life kind of just happens in such a way that it gives us all opportunities to grow and to develop. It's like it just happens anyway, regardless of us trying to make it happen. And I think trying to make it happen gets in the way to a certain extent. So self-knowledge and understanding can help us cooperate with the growth. So it's like learning about how we grow can help us to cooperate with it rather than trying to control it. So for an ENFP, it's another's peak experience, another person's actualization experience. It helps an ENFP to experience their own self-actualization, especially if they're involved in helping the other to attain it. So that because of that self-sacrifice, when they're serving the other, they're actualizing themselves. So another sort of illustration that I have for the ENFP, it's just my own way of looking at it, is like the NE is the head. So the NE is like the part that's just like thinking about all of the different connections between all, seemingly connected and unconnected ideas and so on. FI is like the body or the core of the person, their values and their sense of who they are. TE is the arms. It's like the arms act as a way to sort of put boundaries in place and protect themselves. And the SI is the legs that kind of ground them in reality, ground them in in the present, in the sense those traditional SI decisions about where they live and what they do and who they do it with and so on, are like the legs. So any sort of is discovery of ideas and experiences. FI is the values, TE is the boundaries or the shield, and SI is the decisions to that enable the actualization to occur. Self-actualization is NE and FI development grounded in quiet reflection, rest and exercise. To be able to assert boundaries and values through TE in order to make life decisions, SI, that bring a stability and a focus for NE and FI to actualize core values through NE into the world or their cause. So I hope that makes sense. These are notes. That was a long sentence. I think these were just sort of summaries, so actualization summaries that I came up with. So FI develops through NE experiences. As this FI develops, TE gets an opportunity to assert itself to protect the system through boundaries. This creates stability for them to eventually make decisions, SI, that direct them in a direction that allows them to actualize their beliefs and vision into the world. So these are just really summaries of sort of the self-actualization through the functional stack. Okay, I've been going an hour and 2 minutes, and I've still got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. So this is the headings for this is more around relationships and dynamics. So life is an adventure for the ENFP, and it's very much like serendipitous. You know, the more I'm out there, the more I'm connecting, the more I'm socializing and interacting, the more likely that something is going to happen, and that it was meant to be, that kind of thing. And they trust not knowing, believing and having faith that life will present things when needed. It's like they have faith in NE. I think that's why they seem so excitable sometimes, is that their NE is kind of constantly constantly open to the discovery that it will eventually come across, and it's almost like anticipatory. You know, it anticipates the discovery all the time. So when another person is faced with NE from the ENFP, they can feel very valued and special and important, especially when it's backed up with that with the ENFP's FI depth. I think there's a possibility, and this is something I'm going to go into for a few minutes, but I'll just introduce it. There's a sense that other people could misunderstand that value to feel it means more than it really is. And so when the ENFP sort of feels like they've exhausted the NE exploration with a person, they just naturally kind of move on to talk to somebody else or you know, engage with something else. And for the other person, they could feel that. They could feel like, I thought I was important and now they've just disappeared. I think that's probably more true for an ENTP. It could be felt, that could be felt more when engaging with an ENTP, because with an ENFP, that feeling, part of them, of the ENFP, won't be as will be more gentle with this, but to a certain extent, people could feel like, oh, I thought I was important and now I don't seem like I'm that important anymore. And they could feel as though they were being manipulated, which is most likely a misunderstanding. So NE comes in, it likes to take in information and affect the environment around them, and then it can sort of move on. It's like a gentle storm, comes in, does its thing, and then moves on. So for some people, it could feel like the ENFP's heart was in it, mistaking NE in a sense for their heart. But there's a sense that ENFPs, and hear me out on this, but it's like they have two hearts, and I'll explain what I mean. They can have like an NE heart and an FI heart. Is just my way of explaining this. And many people get to know the NE heart, but very few get the FI heart. And a lot of people that don't understand the ENFP, when they get the NE heart, they're feeling like they're getting the FI heart. And the ENFP may not see this, may not understand this, but this could be a way to explain what is happening. So there's like, let me draw this. So we can have, hopefully this is going to be seen on the board. Yep. So this is like their NE heart. So it's big, and there's lots and lots of people that get impacted by this. Lots and lots of people get impacted by it. But then there's this smaller core, which is like their FI heart, and there might only be a few people in there, few people that get the ENFP. It's like their inner sanctum, the people that know them inside and out. A lot of people out here will, because of this NE heart, will feel like they're in here, but they're not. And this is where the ENFP gets exhausted, is out here. So this FI heart is just the people that occupy the inner sanctum, that they're allowed in, that get the ENFP in their depth. So lots of people could feel like they're in here, but they're not. A few get in because of private FI, but also few people know that this exists. People think that this is the ENFP, but it's really this and this that is more complete picture of the ENFP's heart, in a sense. So the outer circle drains the ENFP. It's in here, and the people that are able to occupy here, that the ENFPs need to nurture to maintain balance. They need to be nurtured because they're others focused and self-sacrificing. They need people that will be there to help fulfill the current or present needs for the ENFP, and even actually help them recognize them. So maybe ENFP handle the above, this, better than ENFJs, because ENFJs, because of their FE, the FE really sort of stretches the ENFJ, creating a certain level of emotional exhaustion. But with NE, it's more of a welcome sort of, more the merrier. You know, like the more that we're being influenced for the ENFP, the better, because it leads to more actualization moments. But then it leads them to be more vulnerable, to be caught out with being exhausted. So, next heading is about the relationships in the area of intimate relationships. So, ENFPs have a lot of energy. They like to make the relationship as deep and as special as possible. they can understand others very accurately, but there's probably a desire in a lot of ENFPs to be understood. That FI would, will someone please get me? And they often get got from with NE, but very few get the FI. So in relationships, ENFPs with other NFs is very possible. However, so there's going to be a lot of harmony there and understanding, but maybe a little bit too, could be a little too intense at times. Maybe too much. I put here too much introspection, but maybe it could be just too intense over a longer period. Theoretically, NFs have been matched with NTs. I think mainly because of they share the abstract form of communication, but there can be a balance in the relationship between the thinking and the feeling. So the ones providing a warmth and an empathic viewpoint versus a more logical, systemic viewpoint. So it could help each other to sort of balance each other out. So ENFPs with SJs, they're especially feeling FJs, there could be harmony with both of them having the feeling preference, but possible disconnect with depth with the sensing versus intuition. But I guess I want to point out there that it's possible for any type to have a meaningful relationship with any other type. MBTI certainly offers reasons why there could be, disconnect, conflict and so on. But the MBTI is just one way of looking at the self. We can be connecting with others for multiple of other sorts of reasons, other sorts of value systems, similar life experience, similar family of origin, upbringing experiences, where they want to be in life going forward. Like just lots of different reasons that could bring all sorts of different types together. So I don't want this to be far out, I'm this type and I'm with this type, it's not going to work. This matching is really just within the confines of the theory of the MBTI. So it's just offering a perspective. Because I think there are senses that are old souls. There are senses that have the ability to be intuitive, to see beyond the obvious, to understand the more intuitive type. It's not just really clear-cut sensor and intuition sort of thing. Within the MBTI, where there's more challenges than the other types is the NF with the SP. Just again, looking at it purely from the position of the MBTI, there could be a lot of difficulties with that concrete versus intuitive communication, concrete versus abstract communication, and then that and some of the key sort of differences in values, if you like, or it's more about roles. So the ENFP is about harmony, about cooperation, about indirect influencing, and about authenticity. For SPs, they're more tacticians, which can be perceived by the ENFP as like manipulative, as cunning, as crafty, secretive, hidden agendas and these sorts of things that could be just not saying that those SP roles, not sort of saying they're evil versus the NFs are good, because SPs get stuff done. It's the clash that the two can have, but because of these more core values. and especially like with the opposite type, so the ISTP, you've got your functional stack switched around. So the ENFP, ENFP here, and then the ISTJ. Sorry, I think I said ISTP before. ISTJ is same functions, just in reverse. So they can be both an attraction and a repulsion, or a pulling away. They've got this dominant. They've each got this dominant function that's the inferior function for the other. So there can be that can kind of be a magnet that pulls them together, but then too much of it pulls them apart, and it's naturally draining because they've got to filter everything that's being said from the other, and there's just opportunities for a lot of miscommunication and so on. So ENFPs are they're very much about authenticity, and they can read others whether they're trustworthy or not, whether it's what they're showing me is who they are, that sort of thing. So ENFPs are not too concerned with someone's hiddenness if they're not aware they're hiding it. So, because ENFPs are good at seeing a person's potential, and a person might not even be aware of their own potential. The ENFP is not going to be kind of repelled by that lack of knowledge that the other has in themselves. They're going to be more put off by someone who's consciously hiding something. So ENFPs can tell the difference between the two. ENFPs are designed to notice hidden potential, issues, etc. in people, and then indirectly assist them to moving forward. But then it's up to the other person whether they want to move forward with what's being offered. So ENFPs are really good at discerning what might be hidden in the other person, but can make errors in concluding why they're hiding it. They may sort of think the worst of deception. So they might pick up that somebody is being deceitful, which will just set off alarm bells for anybody, for the ENFP. But because it's like they're about authenticity. Authenticity is the journey, and what they're seeing is conscious deception. They'll see the other person potentially as walking in the opposite direction of what is necessary for growth, and we'll just see that almost as evil, where it might not actually be evil. And so what can happen is that an ENFP can see that they're being deceptive, but then the reasons why they think they're being deceptive can be very inaccurate, because it's like the ENFP, let me try and get this out. Because the ENFP is heading in this direction towards self-actualization through authenticity, seeing someone over here using deception to get what they want, because that is just so foreign, and it could actually really kind of jar the ENFP. They could come up with some reactionary conclusions as to why they're being deceiving, and it could be really so for an ENFP. Choosing not to judge why they're hiding it, why they're being deceptive or hidden or whatever. And I should say, this is not an SP thing. This could be anybody. Any type could do this. Could be hiding or being deceptive. But remaining open, like remaining curious as to why they might be hiding it, could lead to growth for the ENFP, and powerful understanding of the why of the other hiding something. I hope that makes sense. So due to giving out a lot, the ENFP needs to receive. They need people in their lives that are able to nurture them. And a good way of looking at that, for those, some of you might be aware of this, is the love languages. And I've written them down because I always forget one. So it's love languages are physical touch, words of affirmation, gifts, quality time, or acts of service. And these are the way that we both give love and receive love. So often what we do is we give what we want to receive. So if we're words of affirmation, we're often going to be being very encouraging and affirming people with our words, which is a sign that that's what we need. So it's important for people to, in the ENFP's life, to find out what their love language is, which shouldn't be too hard because they're so self-sacrificing. It's like, how do they self-sacrifice? Is then, so I'm losing my train of thought. It's been a long video. It's finding out what their love language is and then help meet that need in the other to fill them up. There's this thing called the Pygmalion. I think I'm pronouncing that right. The Pygmalion project, which essentially is the phenomenon of in relationship of trying to make the other like us. And it's possible that this Pygmalion project, the vulnerability to doing this increases as the types become more different. So just within the MBTI theory, 2 NFs may be much less likely to the Pygmalion project because they're quite similar already. Whereas an NF and an SP, there could be a lot of potential trying to change the other, to think like them, to be, trying to get the SP to be more abstract in the communication and not as so concrete and specific and factual and so on. And so it could possibly increase as the types get further apart. Maybe less likely than the other NFs, due to NE and FI creating autonomy and independence. So ENFP, because of their independent part of them, may be less vulnerable to this project than the other types. Just a thought. And because they're likely to resist dependency and try to make people, they're less likely perhaps to try to make people more like them. I think an ENFP is really good at seeing the uniqueness of the other and wanting them to better that other as opposed to making the other like them. So in regards to parenting, the parenting style for the ENFP is the harmonizer, and they're really good at potentially identifying a child's type and then providing appropriate stimulation for growth for the type of personality that their child is. If you're a parent with an ENFP child, it's possible that they're big talkers. They like to talk, and the real key is to let them talk, or let them extrovert all of this knowledge that they're accumulating and ideas, and let them free associate, get it out there. because that any development builds self-esteem, and in a sense by allowing them to be their authentic self in any particular moment, by just letting them be themselves, they're building in their authenticity, which will be building confidence. And so it builds confidence. So affirming the core FI helps the ENFP grow up to be more at peace with their current self, and let energy go out, rather than letting energy going out to find the self. So more affirmation of who they are in childhood may help them to be less sort of prone to be seeking themselves out there, because they're more affirmed with who they are in here. And if you have an ENFP child, take any conflict that they're having, whether it's with a sibling, with you, or with some people at school, take it really seriously, because that harmony part of them will be so the disharmony that they're experiencing because they're harmonizers is going to be felt very deeply. And so taking it seriously, even if the situation seems petty, will be very settling for them. Alright, so in the workplace, it's the sense that, my sense, ENFPs, they're sort of entrepreneurial, in a people-centered kind of way. Their resources are people, and they're unstructured. They like an unstructured environment, free to implement their vision, and they like to have a variety of people to engage with. So ENFPs need people contact professions. Excuse me, I've just got an itchy nose. Lack of people in a role, draining to say the least. So, yeah, there's very much people focused. It's like people are fuel for their NE in a certain extent. And if there's not a lot of people that they can interact with, they're going to start, their energy levels are just going to drop quite dramatically. They're very much inclusive leaders, very much the catalyst type leader. They like to get everybody involved. And they're great at seeing potential, abstract in their communication, and cooperative in achieving goals. So there's a championing, advocate, and a motivating part of them. But they do it indirectly, like I was stating before. And they're very good at lifting people up. But they don't want to just keep lifting up the same person. That they'll begin to lose respect, because they'll feel that dependency on them. They want to be able to sort of lift somebody up, help them recognize that they have those qualities, and then let the person run with that encouragement, not keep coming back to the ENFP for more encouragement. Very good at motivating a cause, or bringing people around a cause. They're very much, so they're cooperative. They like to achieve goals through the cooperation with others, but they want people to be independent at the same time. They want people to be their own person. So they're diplomatic. They have a diplomatic intelligence. So masters of reconciliation, helping people to understand themselves and each other's points of view. In that sense, it's like maybe the E is the one to create peace in the Middle East. Maybe they're the ones to be able to do that with their diplomacy. So they naturally coach through empowering, but not directly. They activate latent potential. but they can do it from a group perspective. So there's a sense with an ENFP leader, so they've got a group of people around them, that they're able to lead that group within a group context, by empowering the individuals within the group, and they could be quite masterful at this. So there's a sense that they could have the motto of empower the people, develop the people, and everything else will take care of itself. So some of the challenges that an ENFP could have in the workplace is ENFPs, I see them like, in regards to the NF types, they're very much out there, sort of at the front lines. And if they're out in the world of, especially NTs and SPs, because of the more utilitarian approach versus the ENFP's more cooperative approach, they could feel alone while trying to be influential. They could sort of feel like the outcast, or the not quite fitting in. Could be quite sort of possibly the wounded warrior type of person. And being in the workplace, if an ENFP comes across people that are doubting their authenticity, they're sort of judging their NE as being fake or something like that, or suspicious of them, it could be quite painful for them. And dealing with unethical or deceitful or ambitious people could be challenging for them. That could be quite jarring for the ENFP. And so while the ENFP is judged for being phony, could be judged, I should say, for being phony, it's really the ENFP that can read phoniness and fakeness very accurately. So yeah, just a possible interesting, uncomfortable and ironic place for an ENFP to be. So there could be possible tension between their authenticity and any pressure around them to conform. And that could just be an interesting place to be. Rules and regulations are really just suggestions and guidelines for an ENFP. They don't, not that they disregard the rules or regulations, they would take them seriously, but only when they need to be taken seriously. Otherwise, they're more just guidelines. And they might struggle to highlight a negative in another person directly. If they need to deal with maybe with a staff member or something like that. And so there's a sense like if an ENFP had to fire somebody, that's probably going to be more painful for the ENFP than the one being fired. So their championing position in life could cause them to feel the pressure of conformity, placing pressure on their authenticity, in a conflict between authenticity and harmony. But there's a sense, though, even with that situation, that the ENFP will find a way through that. Another challenge that they will have is that they're very good at starting something, of bringing people around a cause, empowering the thing, getting it going, moving it forward. But depending on what it is, after a while, they could not so much bored with it, but lose, I don't know, like lose interest in it or something like that. Once it's up and established, it's more in a maintenance phase. It's just about administration and keeping the thing ticking along. That might be the time for an ENFP to hand over the reins to somebody else that's more equipped to do the admin side of things. The last topic, is the championing aspect of the ENFP. So this will go into, I guess, my take on how an ENFP how do you say it? Like sorry, it's just a bit tired. How the ENFP, the dynamics they have with another person as they're trying to champion the other to grow. So as perceivers, they allow life to happen. But they're very enthusiastic about their approach to this. They like to really be involved. It's like they're really involved in letting it happen, letting life happen, letting things happen around them. And ENFPs are like they're strong warriors. It's like they're warriors, but their weapons, I mentioned this before, their weapons, the weapons that they wield are weapons of reconciliation, motivation, understanding, empowerment, encouragement. So when somebody meets an ENFP, for the most part, the ENFP is saying, you know, I'm safe. I just want to get to know you. Don't pretend with me. Don't portray a false self. Just be who you are. It's safe. Don't worry. Just relax. Be yourself. And I think that the ENFP's Ne and Fi and its enthusiasm and its kind of electric element to it is it's like a safe disarming of other people's weapons and other people's defenses. It's like it really encourages people just to drop the facade and be themselves, so that the ENFP can gain access to the real person. So it seems like the Ne and Fi disarms safely people to get them to open up and provide information that ENFPs can feed into their Ne to develop new ideas and thoughts, and at the same time provide information that may help the other person to grow. So it's like a transaction. So the ENFP disarms the other and encourages them to be their real selves, so that they gain real information that then fires the Ne and the Fi up with the information that it gains from the other, and then the ENFP can then provide information back to the other person. It's almost like a gift to the other for them being authentic, and it's like a harmonious transaction between the two. And so they see subtle possibilities and a person's potential by knitting together the person's gifts, talents, etc. through the person, and weaves this through their Ne map to provide direction or vision for the person. Essentially what I just said before. So Fi can climb into their world, and Ne provide potential pathways to help them actualize into the outer world. So other people are like power sources for the ENFP, and it creates like a chain reaction between the individual and the ENFP. And the ENFP can light up parts of the other person for growth. That's why they can be very good coaches. Identify an area that needs growing, and then empower the other to take the action to better that part of themselves. And I think ENFPs essentially see people as priceless, and they want to let people know their uniqueness and their unique pricelessness. So their Ne statements coded with Fi help them to penetrate and hit the part of the person that needs to hear it. You know, they're very good at sort of that indirect targeting of what needs to be heard. And that's like they electrify their environment, charging the atmosphere with optimism. And this opens people up to hear what they need to hear. So Ne and Fi, it's like a glow of enthusiasm. It's like they're able to interact with a realistic future you, but they do it in the now. So it's like they can gain a sense of where you're at. They gain a sense of who you really are or really could be, and then interact with that who you really are and could really be now, and that sort of empowers you to move forward in who you really are. And I think when an ENFP is in the midst of that, that could almost feel euphoric to people when they're feeling like they're being spoken to deeply when they're being interacted with who they really are. That could almost feel euphoric when they're kind of feeling like they're being got at a deep level. And I think it's also euphoric for the ENFP. It can be very stimulating. Affirm the inner through FI healing and motivate and empower using FE Ne championing. And yeah, it could feel so good that it could almost feel like you're being you could almost feel like a celebrity. You're feeling like you're being sort of worshipped in a way, but not worshipped. It's not the right word, but it's the sense of being lifted up. You're being lifted up and championed in a sense. And it's like they can leave a presence, their presence on a person, and sort of to paint a picture, it's like their presence it's like it leaves an impression on the people and on the environment that they're in. And it's almost like, like in movies or something, when somebody like an alien in a sense touches something, and they take their hand off what they've touched, and it leaves like an energy on the thing that they've touched, like it leaves an impression in that sense. That's kind of the picture that I get when I think of ENFP's ability to affect their environment. And in my own life, I had an ENFP, just as a side note, encourage me in a certain area, and I haven't. That was probably a year and a half ago, and I have not forgotten it, and I will eventually get there with what they were encouraging me to do, and it was. When they said it, it was like they grabbed 2 or 3 components of who I am, wrapped it up into something new, and said, "Hey, try this on for size." And I looked at it and I was just like, "That's exactly what I should be doing. Thank you very much." So they're just very good at doing things like that. And so the ENFP is always everywhere with you. It's like when you're in their presence, they're all over you in a sense. So I'll just read this. It's like the ENFP's face is with you completely. It's like they're there with you completely. And their head, their NE head is like sending out signals, mapping things, figuring things out. Info's coming in and matching and creating maps and new maps, pulling information from here, there, and everywhere. As they're interacting with you, as they're gaining a sense of the world through your eyes, and so on and so forth. It's like a party. It's like and every person that they interact with is its unique party because of they're interacting with the other person's uniqueness, creating new maps, thoughts and ideas and so on for the ENFP. And the ENFP draws you into that party. So the ENFP walks away from every encounter changed just a little bit with new information and so on. And so does the other person. It's like a transaction that brings about change, even if it's only subtle, sometimes not so subtle. And gathering new information that will come in handy, you know, that they'll gain a new perspective on something that could come in handy at some point in the future for themselves or for somebody else. You know, it could be the next person they encounter, that information could be handy for them, or in 100 years' time they could be interacting with somebody and that information from 100 years earlier suddenly appears, and that they can impart that into another person. So some of the challenges, the main challenge for an ENFP is the dependency that others could develop on them, which is a shock to the ENFP because of their own independence. They just assume that other people will be independent. But people could get addicted to the ENFP's enthusiasm and encouragement, and instead of running with what the ENFP offers, they see the ENFP as the source of their the source of what they need, and so become dependent on the ENFP, which will not be good for an ENFP to have that going on, even just with one person, let alone a range of people. And so that's where that TE boundary setting can be really important for them to set people free to how they take the information that they've gained from the ENFP. Set them free to how they handle that and not get caught up in a codependency. Because that could very much lead to a danger of burnout and exhaustion. Okay, so that's page 15. I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that in all of that is information that could be of benefit to you as an ENFP or to ENFPs that you encounter in your life. I thank you for getting to the end of this video. I actually thought it was going to take me an hour. It's taken me an hour and 50. Let me know how you've experienced this. It is a very long video. I may end up cutting it up. I may end up, I'm not sure exactly yet what I'll do, but I hope you've enjoyed this video. I pray. I'd appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up in YouTube, not just in Patreon. And I'll see you in another video.